This war was not supposed to happen. It began with a trade dispute, escalated through diplomatic failure, and ended with the complete destruction of the Khwarazmian Empire between 1219 and 1221. Two empires on the brink of war. In the early 13th century, Central Asia stood at the height of its prosperity. Cities such as Bukhara, Samarkand, Merv, and Nishapur were among the most important urban centers of the Islamic world. They were hubs of trade, learning, administration, and culture, linking China, the Middle East, and Europe through vast commercial networks. Yet within just 3 years, many of these cities would be devastated or destroyed. Their populations would be massacred or displaced, their irrigation systems ruined, and their political order erased. This catastrophe was not caused by famine or disease, but by a rapidly expanding power from the eastern steppe, the Mongol Empire. This is the story of how the Mongols destroyed the Khwarazmian Empire between 1219 and 1221. In this first part, we examine the background to the conflict, the rise of the Mongol Empire, the internal weaknesses of the Khwarazmian state, and the diplomatic breakdown that turned two empires toward war. The rise of the Mongol Empire. At the end of the 12th century, the Mongol steppe was fragmented. Numerous tribes competed for power, bound together by shifting alliances, raids, and vendettas. Survival depended on strength, loyalty, and leadership. Out of this environment emerged a man named Temujin. Born into hardship and exile, Temujin rose through a combination of military skill, personal charisma, and political intelligence. He defeated rival tribal leaders not only through force, but by offering merit-based promotion and loyalty beyond kinship. In 1206, Temujin was proclaimed supreme ruler of all Mongols at a great assembly or Kurultai. He took the title Chinggis Khan, meaning universal ruler. This moment marked the birth of the Mongol Empire. Chinggis Khan reorganized Mongol society and warfare. Tribal divisions were broken down and replaced with a decimal military system, grouping soldiers into units of 10, 100, 1,000, and 10,000. Commanders were chosen for ability rather than noble birth. Law was codified under a system known as the yasa. While harsh, it was applied consistently, creating discipline and cohesion across the army. Loot was distributed according to rules, reducing internal conflict. By the 1210s, the Mongols were no longer simply steppe raiders. They had defeated powerful enemies such as the Naiman and the Western Shah, and were fighting the Jin dynasty of northern China. Through these wars, they acquired siege engineers, administrators, and technical specialists. By 1219, the Mongol army was a highly mobile, disciplined, and adaptable imperial force. To the west lay the Khwarazmian Empire, ruled by Shah Muhammad II. Originally a regional power centered on the Aral Sea region, the Khwarazmian state had expanded rapidly in the early 13th century. Through conquest and political maneuvering, Shah Muhammad came to rule a vast territory stretching from Central Asia into Iran and Afghanistan. On paper, his empire rivaled any power in the region. The cities of the Khwarazmian Empire were wealthy and fortified. Trade flowed along the Silk Roads, and the empire benefited from customs revenue and agriculture supported by complex irrigation systems. Yet beneath this appearance of strength lay deep structural weaknesses. The Khwarazmian state lacked unified leadership. Shah Muhammad distrusted his generals and governors, fearing rebellion. His mother, Terken Khatun, exercised enormous political influence and often issued orders that conflicted with those of the Shah. Governors ruled their provinces with considerable autonomy. Loyalty to the central government was inconsistent, and coordination between military forces was poor. Most critically, Shah Muhammad adopted a defensive military strategy that would prove disastrous. Rather than concentrating his army to face the Mongols in the field, he dispersed his forces across fortified cities. This decision meant that when the Mongols invaded, each city would stand alone. War was not inevitable. It is important to understand that war between the Mongol Empire and the Khwarazmian state was not inevitable. Chinggis Khan initially sought peaceful relations with the Islamic world.
He viewed Khwarezm as a potential trading partner rather than an enemy. Diplomatic messages emphasized peace, commerce, and mutual benefit. Mongol merchants traveled west with official backing. Envoys were exchanged. There was no immediate plan for conquest. The war began not with an invasion, but with a diplomatic catastrophe.
The Otrar Incident. In 1218, a large Mongol trade caravan entered Khwarazmian territory and stopped at the frontier city of Otrar. The governor of Otrar was Inalchuk, a relative of Shah Muhammad. Inalchuk accused the merchants of espionage. Whether this suspicion was genuine or a pretext for seizing their wealth remains debated. What is clear is that the caravan was arrested and its members were executed. When news reached Chinggis Khan, he did not immediately declare war. Instead, he sent envoys to Shah Muhammad demanding justice. He requested that Inalchuk be punished and that compensation be paid. Shah Muhammad faced a choice. He could preserve peace by punishing his governor, or he could assert his authority by rejecting Mongol demands. He chose confrontation. One Mongol envoy was executed. The others were humiliated by having their beards shaved before sent back. In steppe diplomatic culture, this was an unforgivable insult. The decision for war. The execution and humiliation of envoys left Chinggis Khan with no acceptable alternative. To ignore such an insult would undermine his authority across the steppe and beyond. According to contemporary sources, Chinggis Khan withdrew to prepare carefully rather than act in anger. Intelligence was gathered. Routes were studied. The structure of the Khwarazmian state was analyzed. The coming war would not be a raid. It would be a systematic destruction. Preparations for invasion. Chinggis Khan assembled an army estimated by modern historians at between 100,000 and 150,000 troops. This force included cavalry, engineers, and support personnel. Rather than advance along a single route, the Mongols planned a multi-directional invasion. Separate armies would be operating independently, but in coordination, preventing the enemy from concentrating its forces. This approach was revolutionary for its time. Shah Muhammad, meanwhile, remained convinced that city walls could stop the Mongols. His armies stayed dispersed. No unified field army was assembled. As 1219 drew to a close, Mongol forces began crossing the borders of the Khwarazmian Empire. The storm was about to break. Fire and collapse in Transoxiana. By the end of 1219, war between the Mongol Empire and the Khwarazmian state was no longer a possibility. It was a reality. Mongol forces crossed the borders of Transoxiana with speed, coordination, and a level of planning unseen in the region before. This second part follows the opening phase of the invasion, the siege of Otrar, the fall of Bukhara and Samarkand, and the rapid collapse of Khwarazmian central authority. The invasion plan. Chinggis Khan did not lead his army forward as a single mass. Instead, he divided his forces into several independent columns. Each army was given a specific mission, but all operated under a unified strategic plan. One force, led by Chagatai and Ögedei, was assigned to besiege Otrar. This was both a symbolic and strategic objective. Otrar was where the war had begun, and its governor, Inalchuk, had personally ordered the execution of Mongol merchants. Another army advanced north toward the Aral Sea region, securing the frontier and preventing Khwarazmian counterattacks. Chinggis Khan himself, accompanied by his youngest son, Tolu, led the main force south. Instead of following established routes, they crossed the Kizilkum Desert, a route the Khwarazmians believed to be impassable for large armies.
This maneuver achieved complete strategic surprise.
The Siege of Otrar. Otrar was a strong fortress city with thick walls and a substantial garrison. Inalchuk refused to surrender, confident that relief forces would arrive. The Mongols settled in for a prolonged siege. Engineers constructed siege engines, including catapults and battering rams. The city was fully encircled, cutting off supplies and communication. For nearly 5 months, Otrar resisted. However, morale inside the city deteriorated. Eventually, a faction within the garrison opened a gate to the Mongols. The city was stormed. Inalchuk was captured and executed. Later sources claim he was killed by having molten silver poured into his eyes and ears. While this detail may be symbolic or exaggerated, his death was certain. Otrar was systematically looted and destroyed. Its fall marked the complete collapse of the Khwarazmian frontier defense. The March on Bukhara. With Otrar neutralized, Chinggis Khan advanced rapidly toward Bukhara. The defenders believed the desert protected them. They were wrong. The Mongol army emerged unexpectedly from the sands in early 1220. Panic spread through the region. The field army assigned to defend Bukhara fled without battle. The city walls were breached after a short siege. The population retreated to the citadel, which resisted briefly before falling. According to Persian chroniclers, Chinggis Khan entered the main mosque in Bukhara and addressed the inhabitants. He declared that their suffering was punishment for the sins of their rulers. While the exact wording is debated, the message was clear. Resistance was futile. Artisans were spared and deported east. Much of the remaining population was killed or enslaved. Bukhara, one of the great cities of Islam, had fallen. Samarkand, the jewel of Transoxania. Samarkand was the Khwarazmian capital and the most heavily defended city in the region. Its garrison included tens of thousands of soldiers, elite cavalry, and even war elephants. Shah Muhammad II had already fled west, leaving the city to defend itself. The Mongols surrounded Samarkand and began systematic psychological warfare. Prisoners were driven before the walls. Siege engines bombarded defenses day and night. Despite its strength, Samarkand suffered from internal division. Some commanders doubted the Shah's leadership. Others feared total destruction if resistance continued. After several days of fighting, part of the garrison attempted a sortie and was destroyed. Morale collapsed. The city surrendered. As in Bukhara, skilled workers were spared and deported east. Much of the remaining population was killed or enslaved. Samarkand, the jewel of Transoxania, had fallen. The flight of Shah Muhammad II. As Mongol forces advanced, Shah Muhammad II fled westward across Iran. He did not attempt to gather a new army or organize resistance. Instead, he moved constantly, pursued by Mongol detachments under the generals Subutai and Jebe. This pursuit was relentless. The Shah's authority disintegrated as governors surrendered or defected. Any hope of coordinated defense vanished. The Khwarazmian Empire now existed in name only. The collapse of central authority. With the capital lost and the Shah in flight, Khwarazmian resistance became fragmented. Some cities surrendered immediately. Others resisted, hoping for mercy. Mongol policy was consistent. Cities that surrendered quickly were often spared immediate destruction. Cities that resisted faced annihilation. This approach spread fear faster than armies could march. By mid-1220, Transoxania was effectively under Mongol control. Strategic consequences. The fall of Bukhara and Samarkand demonstrated several key features of Mongol warfare. Speed over mass. Intelligence over brute force.
Psychological pressure over prolonged battle. The Khwarazmian strategy of static defense had failed completely. City walls without a field army proved useless against a mobile, adaptive enemy. The destruction of Transoxiana opened the road into Iran and Khorasan. What followed would be even more devastating. Annihilation and aftermath. By the year 1221, the Khwarazmian Empire had already ceased to function as a coherent state. Its capital was lost, its ruler was in flight, and its armies had disintegrated. Yet the most destructive phase of the Mongol War was still to come. In this final part, we follow the Mongol campaigns in Khorasan, the last resistance led by Jalal ad-Din Mongborni, and the long-term consequences of the Khwarazmian Empire's destruction. Tului and the Khorasan campaign. After the fall of Transoxiana, Chinggis Khan turned his attention south and west. The rich region of Khorasan remained unconquered. Its cities, Merv, Nishapur, Herat, Balkh, and Tuz, were among the most populous and culturally important in the Islamic world. Chinggis Khan entrusted this campaign to his youngest son, Tului. The assignment was clear: eliminate all remaining resistance and prevent the Khwarazmian state from re-emerging. Tului's army moved rapidly and systematically. Cities were approached with offers of submission. Resistance was met with overwhelming violence. The destruction of Merv. Merv was one of the greatest cities of medieval Eurasia. Contemporary writers described it as a city of vast suburbs, fertile lands, and immense population. Faced with the Mongol advance, Merv's leaders chose to surrender. The gates were opened, and Mongol troops entered the city. What followed was one of the most infamous massacres of the medieval period. Over several days, the population was systematically killed. Artisans and specialists were separated and sent east. The city's irrigation system was deliberately destroyed, ensuring long-term ruin. While medieval sources report extremely high casualty figures, modern historians caution against taking these numbers literally. Nevertheless, the scale of destruction was undeniable. Merv never recovered its former status. Nishapur and total destruction. Nishapur initially surrendered peacefully. However, during unrest following the occupation, a Mongol commander related to Tului was killed. This single act sealed the city's fate. Tului ordered complete destruction. Mongol forces returned and carried out mass executions. According to Persian chroniclers, the city was razed and its population exterminated. Although the claim that every living being was killed is likely exaggerated, archaeological and historical evidence confirms catastrophic devastation. Nishapur became a symbol of Mongol retribution. Herat and conditional survival. Herat initially avoided destruction by surrendering without resistance. Mongol administrators were installed, and the city was spared. However, a later uprising prompted a renewed Mongol assault. Large portions of the population were killed, and the city suffered severe damage. Herat's experience demonstrated a crucial Mongol principle: submission offered no permanent guarantee if authority was challenged. The death of Shah Muhammad II. While Khorasan burned, Shah Muhammad II continued his flight. Pursued relentlessly by Mongol detachments, he moved from city to city, unable to organize resistance. Isolated and ill, he died in late 1220 or 1221 on an island in the Caspian Sea. With his death, the Khwarazmian Empire effectively ended. Jalal ad-Din Mongborni. The final hope of Khwarazmian resistance rested with the Shah's son, Jalal ad-Din Mongborni. Unlike his father, Jalal ad-Din attempted to fight back. He gathered surviving troops and achieved a notable victory over a Mongol force at the Battle of Parwan. This victory briefly challenged the image of Mongol invincibility. Chinggis Khan personally led the response. In 1221, Mongol forces confronted Jalal ad-Din near the Indus River. The battle ended in decisive Mongol victory. Jalal ad-Din escaped by swimming across the Indus into India. His escape marked the final collapse of organized Khwarazmian resistance. Aftermath and consequences. The destruction of the Khwarazmian Empire had profound consequences. Entire regions were depopulated. Irrigation networks collapsed. Agricultural production declined sharply. Some cities eventually recovered under Mongol rule. Others, like Merv, never regained their former importance. Politically, the removal of the Khwarazmian state opened the Islamic world to further Mongol invasions in the decades that followed. A new Eurasian order. Despite the devastation, Mongol rule eventually facilitated long-distance trade and communication across Eurasia. The so-called Pax Mongolica connected China, Central Asia, the Middle East, and Europe. This transformation, however, was built upon the ruins of states like Khwarazm. The Mongol destruction of the Khwarazmian Empire was not merely a war, it was a turning point in world history. It demonstrated the power of mobility, intelligence, and unified command. It exposed the dangers of political fragmentation and strategic miscalculation. Between 1219 and 1221, one of the greatest empires of the Islamic world was erased. Its fall reshaped Eurasia for centuries to come.